Okay, it's 5 after. Let's go ahead and get started with some introductions. And in the meantime, we'll allow the rest of the people to pop in. I'm Jane Lewis. I'm the executive director at Villa Finale. And joining me from Villa Finale is Farah Varga, who is our manager of marketing and programs. We keep changing her title.
And we keep forgetting my title too, including me.
And she will be monitoring the Q&A and the chats throughout the evening. Also with us is our guest speaker this evening, Major General Angie Salinas, and her assistant, Leticia Martinez. And Farah, I think, has already sort of outlined the very few rules that we have, which is please use the chat and the Q&A buttons on your Zoom screen. And this is the third installment in our annual speaker series. This year it's entitled Power of a Legacy, in honor of the 100th birthday of Walter Mathis, who was the last owner of Villa Finale and bequeathed his estate to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. In honor of him and his legacy, we have focused the series this year on things that were of particular interest and importance to him. Things like hospitality. He was famous for the wonderful parties that he used to host at Villa Finale. Collecting, obviously, with over 12,000 pieces of fine and decorative art and antiques in the house. That was certainly one of his passions. And historic preservation. That was something that was notable, not only at Villa Finale, but in many other places in the city. And perhaps the most important to him was military service. He served in the Army Air Corps during World War II. He was a pilot. He flew numerous missions over Germany and was one of the few in his group to come back alive. And he was highly recognized and for his service to the United States through the Army Air Corps. So this evening, we're delighted to have Major General Angie Salinas with us. She is retired from the U.S. Marine Corps, and currently she is serving as the Chief Executive Officer of the Girl Scouts of Southwest Texas. Shall I call you Angie or Major General Salinas?
Well, my friends just call me late for dinner, so that's fine. We
can get through this faster if I just say Angie.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. Angie served in the U.S. Marine Corps for 39 years, and she was the first Latina promoted to the general officer ranks in the U.S. Marine Corps. Upon her retirement in 2013, she was the senior ranking woman and Hispanic in the Corps. Congratulations, that is awesome. A woman of many firsts, she was a trailblazer for women in the Marine Corps. Her military decorations are many, including the Defense Superior Service Medal and culminating with the Navy Distinguished Service Medal upon her retirement. Her accolades extend past her military experience and include being inducted into San Antonio's Women's Hall of Fame and Hispanic Women in Leadership Hall of Fame. So we are thrilled to have her with us this evening and share some of her experiences with us. So welcome, Major General Salinas.
Thank you, Ms. Jane. I'm delighted to join you. And Farah, I want to say thank you so much for just having this opportunity to really celebrate, I think, again, Mr. Mattis's 100th year, I think. And, you know, he actually flew 65 missions, and he did as the commander of his unit, even though they're allowed after I think 25 missions, they were allowed to come back stateside. He chose to stay on active duty, and he served throughout World War II. And he actually received 3 distinguished flying crosses, the Air Medal, as well as a presidential citation. So that's pretty impressive for a man that came back to San Antonio and then said, you know, what next? And what a wonderful legacy. So I'm honored to join you this evening. I've got Miss Letitia. If you don't mind, I like to tell stories a little bit by showing pictures. So if you don't mind, we're going to let Miss Letitia kind of put up a little presentation. And it's just a lot easier for people to see that I used to be tall and thin. But this is really a great way to tell the story. So this is kind of what I used to do, and then really the powerful legacy, what's next. So next slide. So a lot of people don't know. So I'm a native Texan. My family roots actually goes back to one of the first 5 families that were granted a land, a porción from Spain on my dad's side. So this is kind of home for me, as I like to tell people. But nobody would have imagined that somebody who looked like me, which I love to use this picture because it's like, who would have known, would turn out to be this. So I was the 6th woman selected to General in the United States Marine Corps. And as Ms. Jane said, I was the first Latina to make general as well. And in between, there were a lot of firsts that I also accomplished while I was in the Marine Corps for 39 years, I might add. Next slide. But this is what I get to do now, because a lot of people wonder, well, what would you what do you do after you've kind of made those marks on the world? And I will tell you, this is, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but this is really about continuing, I think, to serve. And so I feel very blessed to be able to do that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, nobody would have imagined that someone that looked like me would rise to the highest ranks of an organization whose motto is the few, the proud, the Marines. It really conjures up images of a far off distant island flag raising of gritty combat weary men, and of a organization that's really made up of a brotherhood. I hadn't planned to join the Marine Corps. A lot of people say, wow, was this your destiny? My brother had joined the Army. However, none of us had really had a chance to go to college. My parents were hardworking, but my mom had a 4th grade education. My dad made it to the 6th grade. So the idea, the American dream for us was that all 5 of us would graduate from high school. And then really the rest was our responsibility. It was our turn to kind of give back to all the good blessings that we had received. So I managed to get to my freshman year of college. As you can tell, it was like the early 70s, not that I was a party girl, but you see kind of beard, smoking cigarettes, which was really kind of the time. But the realities were, I didn't really have a very good support unit. And I was working a great deal just trying to make ends meet. And by the end of my sophomore year, I really found myself at the point where I thought it was just better for me to just go find something else to do. So one day I went to go mail a letter, and out came a Marine recruiter at the post office. And he looked me in the eye and he said, why aren't you a United States Marine? It's 1974. It's the tail end of the Vietnam War. Gas is high. The country is really just up and down. It's very disheveled. I had already seen, a president assassinated, a senator assassinated. I'd seen a charismatic civil rights leader assassinated. So it had been a very turbulent time, I think, growing up to this stage. I had also seen Vietnam protesters. I'd seen anger in the streets. And so this Marine recruiter saying to me, why aren't you a Marine, just was not something that resonated. But I often tell people, I met this Marine recruiter on the 30th of April. And on the 4th of May, I raised my hand and I said, I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And by the 7th of May, I found myself at Parris Island, South Carolina, being yelled at by a drill instructor. And I really stood there with a really bad case of buyer's remorse, wondering what had I done. But the realities were, it was probably the best decision I could have made in my life. It really, it resonated with all the things that I think my parents had tried to instill in me, which is, you have to work hard and nobody's going to give you anything. And education is really important. So I was really blessed. I had a chance after I finished that experience. I got back to college and I was able to finish my college education and then continue in my career. So next slide. So when I came into the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps was about 178,000 strong, and less than 2,000 of them were women. And in the officer corps, of those 2,000, only 300 of them were enlisted. Were officers. So there was a very defined structure, and so there was actually women within the Marine Corps. So each of the services were essentially divided into having their own core within their core, if that makes any sense. And so, results of that, all the women were in charge of other women. And even though we worked in co-ed, with men, like in the law firms or wherever the jobs were that we had, in reality, we competed with each other until 1977, when the law basically said, no, all that is going to go away. And we then, in fact, were totally integrated into the services. And so that's when we really started competing with men. Throughout my entire career, so when we started, I was actually, as an officer, in the first group of women that was integrated in the officer corps. And that was really where the opportunities really started to open for me, as being one of the very few and the prouder, as they say. And throughout my career, as you can kind of see in these pictures, I was either the only woman or only one of a few women within an organization. And I feel really blessed. And so when I say this, is that every job I had, essentially at some point, I became the first woman. And so laying down that legacy, or kind of establishing that opportunity to open doors for other people. Now, one of the funny things is that when I joined the Marine Corps, my mom had no idea that I joined the Marine Corps, because, as I mentioned, that picture, all my family thought I was still in school. And it wasn't until after I was about ready to graduate that my family called and said, they tracked me down at boot camp and said, well, where are you? And I said, well, I'm in Paris Island, which is where the boot camp training is in South Carolina, but they only heard Paris. And so they were very excited, and they thought, oh, she's in Paris and she's, just like having the experience of her lifetime. And of course, I, several days later, said I'll be there. So I got back home, I went down into the valley, and I knocked on the door. I was standing there just as proud as I possibly could be in my uniform. I was starched, my pinstripes, little green and white. I knocked on the door. My mom opens the door and this big smile and says, "Oh, mijita, we already bought Girl Scout cookies." So I had transformed so much in her eyes that she didn't even recognize me. And so it was very interesting, because the idea that as a young Latina, that I would join the Marine Corps, and she often would say, why would you get into something like that? The government doesn't pay well. And it was the idea that I had really found something greater than myself, and the idea of serving, and to serve with others who had chosen this way of life, had tremendous impact. And it was very interesting, because she came to visit me in the early 80s when I was a young lieutenant, and then she never left. She also fell in love with this mission and this idea and this unique core of people who served our nation. And so I was very blessed for her to live with me for over 30 years. And I often like to say that my mom was a better Marine on many days than I, but she would always remind me who I served. And even as I went through my career, and I was the first woman to command at every level from lieutenant to general, she would often remind me that I still needed to take the trash out. So it was always a great career. But as you can see, it was an opportunity of all about leadership. So in 2006, I became the first woman, not only Latina, to make general. I was also the first woman to command the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. And that's where it's Marine boot camp, and the Marine Corps trains at San Diego all the men west of the Mississippi. And so they would all go there for recruit training, and not necessarily having any opportunity other than to just have been a Marine. It caused a little bit of controversy, but I learned the most impactful lesson there, which is from a young Marine who, when he was asked by a congressional member that had come to visit, what is different because you have a woman in command? And his response was, nothing at all. And it really reflected on the fact that it was all about leadership, and that gender doesn't really come into play if you're a good leader. And so I felt very blessed with that. There's a picture there, as you can see, you know, combat gear. I was over in Afghanistan, and it was amazing because I only got an opportunity to be a Girl Scout for 1 year when I was young, because it just wasn't in our DNA, and it just wasn't something my family understood. But when I was over in Afghanistan, everywhere I went, there were boxes of Girl Scout cookies. And I must have just been having this messaging, kind of subliminal messaging of what my future was going to be about. But it was very impressive to me that everywhere I went and a Marine would have a box of cookies, he would often remind me that it was a little piece of home. And so just kind of when you're out there and you're thinking of our military people who served in other places, it's amazing what makes us feel like we're wanted and what we're doing is the right thing because of people at home who think of us often. So I was very blessed. As I said, I've had multiple assignments and tours where I was the first woman to command. And then I realized at some stage that it was no longer about just me, because I always wanted to be known as just a good Marine. I didn't want to be known as a good woman Marine. I didn't want to be known as a good Latina Marine. I just wanted to be known as a good Marine and be respected in that light. And as I reflect back, I realized that about as a mid-level officer that we have a responsibility to give back or pay it forward or whatever the terms are that we want to say. But the idea is that there's somebody always watching. And it's amazing to me how much we can affect and influence people with hope. And I was at a family wedding. We hadn't been home for years. And one of the people were kind of talking about the numbers of people that had come from far away. And at some point I was in the back and, you know, I'm kind of looking at my watch trying to figure out how I can get out of there. And my sister nudges me and she says, I think they're talking about you. And I just heard kind of some mumbling about a Marine. And essentially I was being introduced. Well, as I go to stand up, I'm looking around the room because people are really clapping and they're cheering and they're essentially saying, you know, to me, a reflection of them. And it was about hope and looking into that I represented. And I think when we talk about legacies and who we impact and what we leave behind and what we do better for the next generation, that was my epiphany, was that I really came to the realization that it wasn't about me. It was really about leaving it better. And so I felt very blessed, I think, in that line. But one of the things that makes, I think, having worn the cloth of our nation so impactful is that we're reminded that we serve the American public. And I think the fact that every branch of the service, we take this oath. You know, I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And when you think about that, we're the only nation that swears an allegiance to a piece of paper, to an ideal. And I think that's part of our legacy of what we do and who we are. And that's probably what Mr. Mattis was also thinking when he wanted to continue to serve, because I think he knew that he was making it better. So I woke up one day and I went out to run a physical fitness test, and I gathered all my Marines together as we're getting ready to go out on our run. And I said, you know, Marines, I'm the oldest woman in the United States Marine Corps. And if you can imagine, all these young Marines are saying, okay, that's a trick. I'm not touching that one I'm just not going to go there. I know it's tricky and I'm going to get in trouble. And I looked at them and I said, when we're out on this run, if you're behind me, that's bad. It's really, really bad. So I was trying to use that as their motivation, that they better get ahead of me, because there was no excuse for them to be behind me. But I knew at that point in time that it was time for me to pass the torch to the next generation. So I proudly served for 39 years. And I came home to San Antonio, which again is a great state of Texas, although San Antonio wasn't my home. Family chose to come back to be around our family. And so this is where we settled. But I really had no intentions of working. I think after 39 years, I just said, you know, it's just time I just want to cut the grass. I want to play some golf. I just really want to enjoy ourselves. But I think anybody who's been in the military, where it's Army, Navy, Air Force, the Marines, soon to be the Space Force, the Coast Guardsy, you feel like you need to do something else. And very typical, I still got up every morning at the same exact time, normally around 4:30, I'd get on the treadmill. By 9 a.m., I had my cup of coffee and I was driving over to the food bank to volunteer. Or on Thursdays, it might be at the USO at the airport to hand out, food. And then I just realized that they're just, and even though people were offering me jobs and Fortune 50 companies were asking, just nothing really resonated until one day I got a call from the Girl Scouts and they said they were looking for a CEO. And I got so excited because it was about leadership and the opportunity to influence the next generation of leaders just really spoke to me. And the one thing that I love to tell people about what this picture looks like and then the picture of me with Girl Scouts is all about is that every single Girl Scout wears the American flag, and every single meeting we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And I love the fact that I had to be 19 years old to raise my hand and say, I do solemnly swear to support and defend the Constitution. And I'm with an organization that at the age of 5, girls are learning, on my honor, I will try to serve God and my country. And I just think that this is just, at least for me, has just had this incredible impact. And the 2 jobs that I've had in my entire life are just like the best jobs ever that I could have had. So next slide. So this is just, I want to just say for those of you who are veterans, thank you for your service. Those of us who've worn the cloth of the nation, we know. I love to tell people, when you run into somebody who say, yeah, I'm a veteran too, or I'm a soldier, or you have their back and they have your back, and you can shake a hand and I got it. And I love to tell people that veterans are everywhere, whether it's at, whether you work at USAA or whether you're at CPS or whether you work for the city, any organization that is made up of volunteers, they're veterans there. And I think that's a phenomenal part about living in Military City, USA. But I have to remind people that look like us, like I'm not the first person when they go, okay, we're looking for a veteran. Nobody looks at me. I have to be the one to stand up and say, hey, we're veterans too. Next slide. So just think about that when you're fighting for your free donut at Krispy Kreme, which I just want to remind you that I did go yesterday and got my cup of coffee and my free donut, which is the best part. I think it reminds me that, yeah, that's what we did it. So this is kind of the end of my story. From the end to the legacy piece, which is I get very excited because we get to invest in the future. And I just think that the earlier our young people know that they can do it, and it's about being challenged, it's about stumbling, it's about making mistakes, but it's about character, and it is about patriotism, and it is about philanthropy and community, and it is about being able to leave the place a little bit better than the way you found it. So I just want to remind you can all be calm, because not only am I a Girl Scout, I'm a United States Marine. So with that, I know that I get a lot more great questions, and sometimes I can tell better stories when somebody asks me a tough question. So that's kind of my spiel. Miss Jane, is there? Miss Farah, what do you think? Did we kind of cover the legacy piece?
Yeah,
I think it was fabulous.
Thank you, Miss Jane.
There we go.
All right.
I have a question. Of course, I have a question.
Yes, you should have questions. Good.
I want to know, obviously the Girl Scouts have, the pledge and the motto and a lot of that really sort of mirrored experience in the Marines. But was transitioning to the Girl Scouts like a culture shock for you? Or was it an easy transition for you? Because I picture it being so incredibly different.
Well, it's funny. I'm not so sure it's as much about going from the military, from the Marines to Girl Scouts, as much as the transition of just really going from military to civilian, because that does take some transitioning. I think women have a little bit of an advantage, I think, in that transitioning, because women in the military are also moms. They're somebody's spouse, so they can let their hair down at the end of the day, and they're mixing, if that makes any sense. When you come into the civilian world, the transition really is language, I think, in some ways. But as I said, anyone who's worn a uniform, it's a family. You understand, because you can't find a larger group that has missed more birthdays, missed more babies' first steps, have missed more anniversaries, more significant events, who've gotten their college degrees online. I mean, just imagine every significant event in somebody's life. And those of us, as a single person, I gave up far more holiday routines so that my married, peers could go and be with their families on Christmas. I've been on the lonely end of a post over on some distant, over in Okinawa, Japan, celebrating holidays, with my Marine family, far away from my personal family, if that makes any sense. And so I think when you kind of come from that very cloistered, tight, family, I guess, for no better word, is that was you could trust them. I mean, it's just like I said. And so then you come out here and, you look like this. And so when I have a conversation with somebody and somebody says to me, I got it, a military person saying, I got it, I don't have to worry or think twice about it. But what I have found that out here, somebody says, I got it, and it doesn't have the same value or carry the same weight, because they don't do what they said they're going to do. And so there's some of that little bit of a disappointment. But the one single thing that I always tell people that I really it took me a while to figure out where the difference was I spent the majority of my entire 39 years around men whose voice and the level, their tone is like way down here. And so my first month with the Girl Scouts, I came home with headaches every day and I couldn't figure out, well, my entire organization are girls or women. And so everybody talks up here. And so the octaves are a lot higher. So it took me a while to figure out, oh my God, my head's not used to being around just the voice levels. And so, but I think the fact was that I came into at least nonprofit with an assumption that, these, it's just going to be, no, they're not going to be hardworking. They're just not going to feel like we don't get paid a lot of money, so we're not going to work hard or anything. I could not have been more wrong. I found that the selfless, dedicated people that are in nonprofits, that are in, city organizations, they're as dedicated and motivated as any service member. And I think that was probably a surprise adjustment for me in so many ways, because I had to adjust my own fires, if that makes any sense. So that's really been some of the little bit of the adjustments that I've enjoyed. But to me, it's been because I went from where I did to where I am. It wasn't as much of a gap, which is probably why I chose not to go into large business. As I said, I've been approached to go to some Fortune 50 companies, and I just don't think. And I remember interviewing many years ago at a big company, because when I got to 20 years, I said, oh, it's time to retire. I'm going to get out. I can go make a lot of money. I'll make a lot more money than I'm doing in the military. And I remember going to interview for a big company, and I remember the HR person at some point who just was like all baffled, and they had paperwork and they were just like overwhelmed, to say no better. And I wasn't getting a whole lot of personal attention. And he finally at one point said to me, because I asked him, I said, well, what motivates you? Why do you come to work? And I made the assumption that he was going to say, oh, we get paid really well. And he looked at me and he pushed back and he said, if you think you're going to find what you have in the military out here, you're not.
Wow.
And it surprised me. So I went back home, and of course I mentioned my mom was there, who had already told me, you really should think about this, because I don't think you really know how to do much. so but she said, you can always go and do something else, but you aren't going to always get to be a Marine. So you ought to do this for as long as you can, and then you can worry about the next stage. And I always tell people, that's the best advice I got, because I spent 19 more years in the Marine Corps, because she said, you know what, if this is what matters, and this is what motivates you, and this is your heart and your soul, why? Because the money really didn't matter. I thought it did, if that made any sense. And I think that was just peace. So very long answer, I'm sure, to a good question.
No, that's very helpful, and I'm really glad that you found the nonprofit world, because I know Jane feels the same way. We work very hard, and we do it regardless of what we get paid, and we are a family. There at Villa Finale, at least, it's a family environment. We're friends and we're coworkers, but we're family too. And it seems like you found that type of connection that you'd always had within a nonprofit environment. And it's nice to hear, because you always sort of look at the corporate world and, oh, it's so different. And Jane's been in the corporate world, so she can tell you it's very different.
Yeah, I spent 15 years for a Fortune 50 company as an executive, and it's a breath of fresh air, really, to be in the nonprofit world. And you really do feel like you're giving something back, and it really is a great environment. I think we have some questions coming in.
Yeah. Nancy asked, how many women are in the Marine Corps now? And do you know what percentage are officers?
So great question. So for years, we've really aspired to be able to increase across the board, obviously, the diversity of the Marine Corps, all the services, to be perfectly honest. All the services, the other services, Air Force, because again, many of them have medical fields. So all three of the other services, so the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force have medical fields, which is a huge draw for many women. The Marine Corps is a combat organization, and so we don't have a medical field. We are part of the Department of the Navy. So the occupational fields really limited women to be able to fill them until the combat exclusion law was actually eradicated just when I retired in 2013. So that's a long answer. So we're roughly about close to 10%. And I think there is a higher proportion of women officers now. So I want to, and please don't quote me, but we're around the 10 to 12%. So enlisted, I think, is still around the 8%. And I think the officers have now escalated to about the 12%. Keeping in mind that now the opportunities for officers now come through the academies, which of course did not occur until our first class came out in 1980. And so as that included ROTC, many more colleges are now providing those opportunities for women to come in. So fewer and fewer women are actually coming into the military, essentially off the streets, into our officer programs. So good question. But the good news is women fly aircraft. They fly combat aircraft. They are, they're gunners now. So we've got them in charge of artilleries. We have an infantry officer now. Now, keep in mind, I think we have 2 or 3. But again, the transition and the timing that it takes to kind of get those checkpoints. So I'm just excited, because the realities are, and the other 3 services have been far more progressive. I mean, they had their first woman general in the 70s. The Air Force did. Jeannie Holds, I think, was one of the first women generals. When I came into the Marine Corps, women couldn't even be a general. So the fact that I couldn't even aspire to be a general when I joined, and we didn't even have our first woman general until the late 80s. So if you can kind of imagine, so that's when people go, you're like only the 6th woman. I said, yeah, the Marine Corps has been around since 1775. So to have been the 6th woman really is a statistic, because we weren't just being selected at the rate. But the good news is that today, and again, not huge numbers, but we have a 3-star, we have 1 or 2 2-stars, and a couple of 1-stars. So statistically, the Marine Corps, again, with the smallest population of generals, to now have 6 or 7 that are women is a pretty phenomenal feat, considering it takes 26 to 28 years for a woman to make it into the general officer ranks.
Wow.
Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Linda asks, first of all, Linda says, wow, 39 years. Thank you so much for your service. She's a traveling VA physician. And she asked if you were deployed to combat areas.
No, my combat was, I became the unfortunately, you know how you you're really good at what you do. And early on, I was the first woman to get into the recruiting business for the Marine Corps. And I was so good at it that every time that I wanted to go and do like Marine things was just exactly when the Marine Corps needed the recruiting expertise. So for example, when we went to Gulf War I, you know, that's when I got pulled off to go into recruiting duty. And then eventually as we got to the next stages, because how do you recruit all volunteers during a combat? You know, I mean, there aren't a lot of parents that want to bring their children to the recruiter and say, yes, we're in the middle of a war and we want your child to go. So my expertise fell into that arena because there were so few of us that were pretty good at it. So many of those pictures is because when I was in manpower, I was the director of manpower for the Marine Corps. So I would go overseas to see the troops in an effort to be able to figure out what was happening, what they needed, talk to commanders and ensure that they were getting the needs met to be able to fully deploy what they needed to get done. But I did my standard tours overseas to Okinawa, Japan, which is our deployed status. So good question.
We've got amazing questions coming in. I'm hopeful we have time for everything because they're so good. Sylvia asks, as a first generation Mexican American, sometimes I received a little pushback from my parents when I wanted to have life experiences that were not traditional to our culture. Did you feel any of that when you joined the Marines? Did anyone in your family doubt that you would be successful simply for being a woman in the military?
Well, as I mentioned, you know, I didn't tell anybody. So I got to be a Marine so that nobody would be able to apply all the pressures, you know, the guilt, all the pieces, you know, girls don't do that sort of thing. You know, girls don't join the Marines, you know, ¿por qué te metiste? So I used to have to tell my parents, you know, like my mom, you know, my standard joke to her was, my God, Mom, you know, there's 178,000 men. You know, there's 2,000 women. The odds are really good. I'm going to get married, you know, so I had to kind of, you know, like present it because their image was just what they saw on TV and just on movies and Sands of Iwo Jima. And so they would never see, there were any role models, you know, there was nothing for them to see as a woman portrayed in a positive light for wearing a uniform, if that makes any sense. And, you know, her conversion to supporting me happened when she moved in with me. And, you know, when I would give a lot of my public speaking, I always use my mom as a great example because we all have our mothers, you know, everybody's got a mom story, you know, and either, you know, they push you, but it's just a unique relationship. And every time I'd get promoted and I'd come home, you know, I'd tell my mom, hey, you know, guess what? I'm going to go be the first woman to do this, or I got promoted. And she would say, oh, that's so nice, you know, but, you know, if you'd been a lawyer, you know, imagine, you know, because she was a domestic, so she cleaned houses when I was young, and, you know, she cleaned homes of lawyers, and they always had big homes, and they had lots of cars, and they just seemed very affluent. And so she kind of saw success as a lawyer. So every time, I mean, throughout all these years, I come home with these great successes I was doing. I was the only one, you know, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. But if you've been a lawyer, you know, so it wasn't until I made general and I commanded the recruit depot in San Diego, you know, I mean, it's huge parade. There's hundreds of people out there. I mean, the mayors are there. I mean, it was a big deal as the first woman to take command, and the parades, the flags, the band. I mean, it was the whole thing. And so, and then we're moving into the general's house, you know, this big, huge 7,000 square foot home. And I have cooks and I have the aides. And I mean, it's just, you know, it's a little overwhelming. It's like going to the White House, I suspect. And so, you know, in the middle of all this, you know, I'd say, well, Mom, you know, what do you think? And yeah, you know, this is really nice, you know, but could you imagine if you're a lawyer? So I was like, oh my God, what do you have to do? You know? And then I came home one day and I said, Mom, you know, guess what? And she said, what? I said, well, you know how you're always saying I should have been a lawyer? And she says, yes, I think you would have been so successful. I said, well, guess what? All the lawyers work for me. So that was kind of her epiphany, was to realize that all these people that she saw to be successful actually answered to me. So that was kind of our aha moment. Okay, I've arrived. So that was kind of, yeah, it was a tough sell, I think, all along with my parents and my family. And I think once I really started to achieve the successes, then it became, as I said, I not only represented my immediate family, but then I started to represent my community, my Hispanic family, and then just our culture, you know, with great pride, with people wanting to say, wow, yes, she's one of us.
So Deborah, who is the Air Force nurse, she's feeling a little kinship with you, feeling like she's saying we're serving our country in different capacities as retired military, so she feels you there. She said with the nurse corps was predominantly women when she joined in 1976, but over time more men joined, and she was really happy to see that. She has a question. She was in the Girl Scouts and she made it to cadet. I don't know what that is. I was never a Girl Scout. So in the 60s and 70s, she said, I would like to think the core of the Girl Scouts hasn't changed. Your thoughts on that?
So the core, the mission, you know, to build girls of courage and confidence and character that make the world a better place. I mean, that mission, I think, just resonates. I think it's changed a little bit over the years because we try to stay adaptable to the changing girl. But as I said, every girl wearing the American flag, you know, it's hard to find an organization that teaches patriotism. I mean, just like daily. I mean, it's even tough to go into a school where like all our girls stand up and they do the Pledge of Allegiance. I mean, we teach them how to take care of the flag. We still march in with the flag. They march out, they wear their gloves, you know, so a lot of the core elements, but it's about the character aspect of it. So in the big picture, I would say the values, the core of what it's supposed to be has not changed. And the things that girls get to do, it has like really changed. I mean, a lot of people still think it's just about, you know, I always talk about macaroni necklaces, you know, and, you know, like, you know, crafts, but it's not. I mean, it is, you know, when you think of cookies, everybody thinks it's about the cookies. It's entrepreneurial. These girls that sell cookies right now, oh my God, they're going to be in competition with Amazon. You know, Bezos needs to like step aside because these girls are now logisticians. I mean, they're getting their cookies. They have accountability for them. They know how much money they're going to make for every box. They already have a plan for what they're going to do with their proceeds. They're going to buy beds for the you know, the shelters, for the dog shelters. I mean, they you know, it's amazing what they can do, but they're doing robotics, they're flying drones, you know, they've got plans to be astronauts. They are, I mean, it's insane. And I get a little excited about it because it's limitless, you know, and they understand that armed with an education. But what I love about the Girl Scouts, in addition to everything I've already talked about, is that they also learn philanthropy and community involvement. So they understand about giving back to their communities. And even in the cases where many of them will sell, you know, their cookies, they'll donate their cookie proceeds back to the council to pay for the membership of a Girl Scout that can't afford to be a Girl Scout. And so yeah, it's kind of changed in some ways, but in reality, I think what Juliet Gordon Lowe meant, you know, from the very beginning, which is to give a place for girls to thrive, I don't think that's changed.
And definitely with our Gold Award Girl Scouts, we definitely see their passion for community service.
So that's the ways it's changed have been very good ways, very positive ways.
Yeah, so we've really gotten, so I like to think when I look at some of the Girl Scout uniforms that they had in the 60s and the 70s, yeah, that's probably kind of gone away because that little prison matron look has really kind of gone away. So now
That's probably
they're a little
good.
bit more fashion conscious for the girls these days.
Before I ask the next question, this is going to kill me if I don't ask this. What is your favorite Girl Scout cookie? I have to know because everyone has a favorite.
Yes, mine, just I love the trefoil cookie, and the trefoil cookie is kind of like the little sugar,
Right.
the silver one. I mean, I guess like it's
Shortbread.
shortbread.
Cookie,
Thank you.
shortbread. Yep.
I was like going sourdough, but I'm thinking sourdough breads. But yes, that's my favorite one. Although it has competition now because last year we introduced a new cookie called Lemon Ups, and I got to tell you, they're pretty stinking good.
Well, I think Lisa likes the trefoils best, and actually she has the next question. She says 39 years of service is amazing. She says, first, thank you for a lifetime of service. She's wondering if there's one experience in those 39 years that stands out that affected you the most, good or bad, that perhaps changed you forever and that you won't ever forget. That's a big question. It's a good one.
That is, and I think it's really that story that I said earlier about when I thought I was ready to get out, and when that HR person said to me, "If you think you're going to find, out here what you have in there, you're not." I think that really, and then my mom echoing, kind of that theme about doing something until the organization doesn't want you anymore, and because there's always going to be there are pitfalls, mistakes. Oh, I should have gone left instead of right. But when you really talk about, that tipping point, that really changed the entire course of my life, because I would have gotten out as a lieutenant colonel. I wouldn't have had a chance to command. I wouldn't have made any, major impacts, I guess, in the sense of having a voice, because it took me to break, I guess, from when you break and I call it the concrete, ceiling, because I don't think it's glass, because in my particular case, I couldn't see. I didn't know I could have been a general, so there was nothing for me to look up to see. But I think once I got that, it gave me such a voice for so many others that don't get a voice because maybe they're just in the crowd, and it's hard to be heard when you're in the big crowd. And that's why I think it's incumbent, when you're given a gift and an opportunity to use it, not for yourself, but to make it better for someone else. So hopefully that answered her question.
Have you, another question we have is, have you seen change in the treatment of women in the military over your 39 years?
That's a great question. Yes, and I'm sure many who have served, obviously changed. So go back to, Gloria Steinem in the 70s. We were, women were starting to get into the workforce. The change that started with me, at least, was, I got paid exactly the same rate as my male counterpart when I joined. So I was a E2. We both got paid, $48 a payday. So that was it. The things that I didn't have access to, which was very interesting, was actually status as a woman, like if you were married. So if you were married in active duty and your husband, for example, was not a Marine, let's say he was just a civilian, he's an accountant, there were double standards. So a husband had to show, because institutionally, and I think this could have probably just been an American thing, but it was difficult for anybody to understand that a man would be dependent on his wife for his income. And so a spouse had to prove that he was dependent on his wife. So he had to do all this paperwork like a dependent, but he had to show that 51% of the dependence was on his wife. If they didn't do that, he didn't have medical, he couldn't have access to the base. He couldn't go to the commissary and buy the groceries. I mean, so all those things that were just automatic to a male that was married and had a spouse, so those are some of the double standards. In the early 70s, anybody that got pregnant was automatically put out of the military. So you couldn't be a married, woman with children and be on active duty. If you married somebody that was a divorcee, or he was a widower and he had children, you had to get out. I mean, so there were a lot of decisions that were made that that were just like rules that you had to abide by to play. Fortunately, there were some incredible women that bucked the system, so they went and sued the federal government. And as a result of it, there were some incredible changes. And if you have had a chance to read RBG's book, she was one of the people that did those cases that there was an Air Force officer, I think, that challenged, saying, hey, I should be able to have a kid and stay on active duty. And so those were the changes that kind of came across. But more importantly, the one significant piece, in addition to just what I call the nickel and dime things, like I could never wear slacks, at certain, like it was just like crazy, you're going to go fly on an aircraft, a cargo plane, and you had to be in a skirt, and you're trying to go up like this little net ladder, in your heels, so they were it was really funny. But looking back on it now, because nowadays our young troops have no idea that was a big deal. So I think a lot of that, though, was really societal, but the occupational fields is really probably the biggest advancements. And that's what I said today. In 2013, the combat exclusion law really allows women to do everything. And so with that means they could be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They can be head of the NSA. There's just, now it's just really truly talent. And that's the changes.
That's good to hear. We have a couple of comments. I do want to read them because they're kind of fun and nice. Linda says, I was a Brownie / junior scout / cadet / senior Mariner scout. Again, I don't know what any of those things are. From 58 to 69, and you're right, the uniforms were atrocious.
Yeah.
Memories.
Yeah. I mean, it was a whole different way of being scarred as a kid.
And Teresa says, wow, gracias. This is an amazing story. So
thank you.
Yeah, and it is. This has been an amazing story. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, I don't know how we're doing on time. We get 3 more. Those 3 questions already been answered?
I think so. Let me see.
They have. They're the ones
Yeah.
that we already answered.
Yeah.
Well, Angie, this really has been an amazing story, and it really is an amazing legacy that you are bringing to the Girl Scouts and to the community in San Antonio, well, Southwest Texas. And we are very, very grateful to you taking the time to share your experience with us. And thank you to the audience members for their participation as well. Lots of good questions and comments. And so speaking from a woman that had to break that glass ceiling too, I'm very proud of what you are doing. And thank you very much for your service, both in the Marines and with the Girl Scouts. And I know that you're an excellent role model to many, many young women today. So thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you for your tremendous support of not only this organization, but I just thank all our men and women in uniform and those who've been veterans, because there is just great pride, I think, of knowing that we've served. And I think the fact that, I know, Linda, you work, with the VA, thank you, because I know that in itself is just a tremendous labor of love. And I've been to the VA, and I know that there are just so many incredible challenges. And yet I've never not met somebody that is as dedicated and focused and concerned about providing the services that any man or woman that served deserves. So just thank you for that. But yeah, I just feel really blessed. I can't tell you how excited I am that I chose San Antonio. My family and I kind of went through this checklist about San Diego, California, or San Antonio, and San Diego. And so I don't want to say it was kind of a coin toss, but when we chose San Antonio, my first couple, the first summer, I think, when I was going through the first 100-degree temperatures, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like when you chose poorly, but in hindsight, I just feel very blessed to have joined a wonderful philanthropic community. And just thank you all very much. I hope that you will support your Girl Scouts, but you'll continue to just know that the next generation is just, we're handing them this, and it's incumbent on us, and especially now, it's a challenge challenging time, as we all know. We're all in kind of survival mode, I think. How do we make sure that not only that we're here next year, but we're an organization that's been around for over 105 years. And, I often have to remind myself, you can't fail at this, because the generations of girls, for the next 100 years, if we can't figure this out as a community to support, then shame on us, if that makes any sense. And so I'm hoping that really people will understand that this is just a critical cry for all of us this year, and that I hope people will just be very generous in what they do, and whatever it is that they believe in and support, that they just, that they support it. So that's my call to action, as they say. So thank you, Ms. Jane. Ms. Farah, thank you so much.
Thank you
I'm
very
just really
much.
so excited.
Well, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay, all right. Please take care. Letitia, I think you've got a little bit in there as well. Okay, yeah. So Letitia's doing the call to action. If you want to volunteer, I heard a couple former Girl Scouts out there. We're always
There it
looking
is.
for troop leaders and cookie buyers. So that's what we're looking for. All right. Well, please take care. Be safe, and happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Good
Good
night.
Good
night.
night.